I am Dr. Carrie Horn, and you are listening to an excerpt from my book, A Soul Aligned: How God Heals His Creations. Healing in Layers. As God heals us, our hearts are filled with His perfect peace. People often describe that their bodies feel sleepy but peaceful. If your body is feeling sleepy, God is telling you through your body to rest. Nevertheless, in order to give our minds and bodies permission to rest, we have to learn how to rest in Him. Resting in Him is one of the first things that He will teach you to do when He begins to heal you, because trusting Him is critical to your receiving of His healing ministry. He is going to teach you, often through your body, what He requires of you. Your body is one of the ways He has designed you to listen to Him and receive His ministry. Peace, rest, and heart healing may feel foreign because we're not used to receiving true healing that comes from God. It will feel foreign, but not confusing. You will be certain who is healing you by the spirit of peace God brings to you. God teaches us what it is to rest in Him and to remain in Him. During healing, we may also feel pain or sensations as the unresolved emotional experiences to which we have been holding finally release from us when we integrate the lesson for which God has sent those experiences. We may notice the difference between pain that is trapped in our body and pain that is releasing as we receive true healing from God. And release may be a new sensation for us since we have been used to holding on and stuffing our unresolved pain back down. As layers of healing arise, they rise in themes through memories, feelings, sensations, reenactments, thoughts, inspirations, and dreams. There's no limit to how God gets our attention, so we must train ourselves to pay attention to listen to how He speaks. As we listen for the themes and focus on healing from our unresolved suffering, we also search our hearts for the mistakes, the sins that we have acted out from our pain. This is how God heals our hearts and sanctifies us. He will show us what we have been through, and He will show us what we have done. In perfect conformity to His will, He heals us from the pain of our experiences, convicts us of our own sin, so that godly grief that leads to repentance, and through the identification of being a sinner with those who have sinned against us, we realize our need for grace and forgiveness. This process enables us to truly forgive. Forgiveness is not a decision. Forgiveness begins with a decision, but is fulfilled by a process that begins with our own healing. We cannot forgive superficially in our flesh. We forgive genuinely with our heart. Remember that though we have sustained harm, it was not the person who harmed us, it was the enemy's attack on us through that person. People who have unresolved suffering have been primed by the enemy in order for him to attack them and to attack others through them. Though we have responsibility to work on our hearts and heal, as we experience clarity regarding our own sins, we realize that we cannot adequately judge our own capacities and limitations, so it is impossible to judge others. When we understand this, we are able to let go of judgment and resentment because we know that God is just and He is the only one capable of judging correctly. We realize that we need grace as much as others, and resentment is the enemy's attempt to attack and preoccupy us in the flesh and to scapegoat others for his detestable acts. When we succumb, we remain trapped in our suffering through chronic misdirected anger, resentment, judgment, disillusionment, and pain. We must differentiate between healing painful experiences and letting go of spiritual attacks and schemes. We recognize spiritual attacks by their chronic and relentless nature. When I talk about letting go of attacks, I'm referring to letting go of the lies associated with them that keep us stuck. Lies and tricks such as, I'm responsible for achieving justice, and I have the authority to judge another person's sin. We must heal our experiences by acknowledging our feelings and reminding ourselves of what God tells us about our circumstances. God tells us that vengeance, wrath, and judgment and justice are His, not ours. God tells us to remove the plank from our own eye, and then we can help others to remove the speck from their eye. He tells us to purify our hearts and to forgive rebuking the unrepentant, but always showing mercy and graciousness as we have been shown by him. This can be difficult if we believe that others have the power to steal from us, but God alone provides and God alone removes. Let the Lord do what he knows is good, and we must work our hearts into trust, faith, and reliance on him to provide for us both in this life and in the life to come. Chronic attacks will not remit until we have acknowledged our feelings, processed and resolved the emotional experiences, and integrated the learning that God has ordained. In the process I just described of working our hearts into God's truth, we cannot even glimpse this understanding and receive God's peace unless we have first acknowledged our feelings. It would be impossible. When we engage in this level of personal accountability, God heals and seals us, and the enemy has no legal right to occupy our hearts because we have been made clean through true and genuine faith in our hearts. If we believe in God, this is the process we will live because he has commanded it. Part of the process of integration involves being able to make sense of this spiritual battle. If we believe that justice is ours rather than God's, we will continue to hold on until we achieve justice. Our self-idolatry and resentment gives the enemy a legal right to occupy and attack us. If we judge others for their sins and focus on the speck in their eye rather than the plank in our own, our sin will allow the enemy a legal right to occupy us. Forgiveness, however, is not a mental decision, but rather a process of relating with the tender and wounded child within us and shepherding him or her in the ways of the Lord. Our inner parent helps us to sort through and remember what God tells us about the spiritual battle, what he tells us about his love for us, about justice that he will bring, and blessing that he bestows to those who obey him. Though we all have responsibility, we cannot judge to what degree. As we learn the ways in which we have been used and attacked, we learn that we do not possess full understanding of our own mistakes. Jesus acknowledged this when he died for us. He forgave the people who crucified him, and he said, "They know not what they do." Luke 23:34. We learn that we can forgive others and ourselves for our mistakes and our ignorance and defer justice and vengeance to God, knowing that as we judge, so we will be judged with that same measure. Matthew 7:2. But that what is forgiven on earth is forgiven in heaven. John 20:23. And that love through forgiveness covers a multitude of our own sins. 1 Peter 4:8. Forgiveness cleanses our hearts and souls. Forgiveness is for us. Forgiveness is separate from discernment and re-engagement. We can forgive a person without re-engaging in a relationship with him. We know that the enemy will stop at nothing to destroy us, so when we call out his attacks on us, we are freed up to redirect power to God. We let go of the distraction of trying to figure out why a person hurt us so badly, because we know that the enemy's behavior is not personal. We have no emotional investment in the enemy, and we know that God will deal with him on our behalf. We also know that our Father will redeem every horrible experience for our growth, joy, and protection. But let a man examine himself, and so let him eat of that bread and drink of that cup. 1 Corinthians 11:28. We are commanded to work on our hearts. God's word tells us that love fulfills all laws, and his first and greatest commandment is to love God with all our heart, mind, and soul. And secondly, to love one another as he has loved us. Matthew 22:34-40. In order to accomplish love, particularly for those who have hurt us, we must work on our hearts. We find ourselves refocusing on self-love and receiving God's love and healing as we work on our hearts. As we discover our errors and have gentle compassion toward ourselves, we find it easier to feel compassion for others and to forgive them. We are humbled as we realize the forgiveness that has been extended to us, and as we acknowledge that we need God's forgiveness too. We can love our enemies and forgive them while protecting ourselves. We can even pray for them to heal and grow while praying for our own healing and growth. If we are struggling with turning our hearts according to God, we can pray for him to help us to turn our hearts and know that he will absolutely help us according to his will for our sanctification and holiness. The following exercise is entitled Identifying Layers of Healing. You're going to need a journal and a pen. What layer of healing do you hear or feel? Name all that comes to mind and how God brought this up for you. For example, the layer I feel today is regarding sexual immorality and dependence on men. I woke up with a memory and feelings of shame. What do you feel? Do you feel any compulsions from your feelings? For example, I feel shame, and the shame makes me want to hide and deny or excuse what I have done. Do you recognize the enemy's attack to keep you from healing? Name all of it. For example, yes, shame, compulsion, fear, self-loathing, anxiety, lust, distraction, and fantasy. What did your sin create in you? For example, fear, dependence, loneliness, insecurity, and shame. Is this an isolated theme or an ongoing theme in your life? Example, it has been an ongoing theme. Is there unresolved suffering connected to this theme? Example, yes, my father was unavailable, frightening, and unstable. I could not submit to him, and I needed so badly to safely submit to him. Now, with your non-dominant hand from your inner child, write the feelings of your inner child. What did you need as a child? What has this created in you? Do you still feel the feelings you wrote above today? How did you attempt to take control instead of surrendering to God? How did you attempt to fill voids instead of healing with God? Do you feel a void that is meant to be filled in a relationship with God? Can you see how filling your void of relationships with God, with people, places, and things, leads to perpetual void and misuse of relationships? How can you reposture yourself to bring your feelings and behaviors in agreement with how God created you? With your dominant hand, write a letter to your inner child. Validate the grief that he or she has felt. Ask him or her forgiveness for how you have misused him or her, and write down your commitments to him or her. Then write a letter to God. Write down what you understand now, ask for forgiveness, and write your commitments to your relationship. Ask God to heal and grow you, and ask for him to heal and grow the person who has hurt you. Sit in communion with God and ask for his perspective. Write down what he speaks to you. If you have enjoyed this reading, be sure to check out the Heart Known series workbook that is used in conjunction with A Soul Aligned. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below, and ring the bell icon for more videos like this. Thank you for listening, and God bless.